Next is chapter 4, Finding and Discussion. Uh, Depiction of genital trauma on motherhood through literary elements in the post. First, the plot of the post is non-linear, reflecting how genital trauma disrupt time and memory, shift between Britney's present motherhood and memories of Cecilia Eta show that trauma is resurfaced cynically rather than remaining in the past. As the quotation, I thought I had buried this memory but they come back when I held Violet for the first time. I thought motherhood would be a clean slate, but instead it was a mirror, affecting everything I had tried to escape. This quotation showed the non-linear plot, where the act of holding Violet pulls Whitney back into past generation. The imagery of motherhood as a mirror reflects the cynical structure of the plot, showing that generational trauma resurfaces through maternal experience rather than remaining confined in the past. Second, the setting. Setting in the post apart as emotionally encoded space that embodies genital trauma. Domestic environment are portrayed as oppressive and anxiety-inducing, affecting Whitney's childhood fear and shaping her maternal perception. As the quotation, the house was silent, the kind of silence that made you hold your breath. The house wasn't just a place we live in, it was like another character. This quotation reinforced the setting as the manifestation of trauma by representing the house as an active presence that enforced fear and invisibility. The oppressive atmosphere demonstrates how generational trauma became embedded in physical space, turning the home into source of psychological distress rather than safety. The third, conflict reveals how generational trauma manifests through emotional struggle and narrative relation breakdown. Whitney's fear of failing as a mother is intensified by failed rejection and false dismissal of her concern. As the quotation, she wouldn't let me hold her. Every scream felt like a proof that I had felt her. This quotation exemplifies conflict as the central site where trauma is reenacted. Pilot physical rejection and emotional collapse transform motherhood into battleground, reinforce how generational trauma disrupt intimacy and sustain internal conflict. And the fourth, characterization. Characterization depict Britney as a mother whose identity is shaped by intergenerational trauma. Her self-doubt, fear, and emotional labor reflect the psychological legacy passed down through generations. As the quotation, love her. I did, but every time she cried, I felt like I was failing some invisible test. I was terrified she go up and see me the way I saw my mother. This quotation reinforced Britney's characterization as a trauma-affected mother. Her fear of being perceived as emotionally distant mirrors her experience with her mother, demonstrate how genital trauma became described into maternal identity. Next, how the main character in the post copes with genital trauma as mother. The first one is desire for escape and psychological burden. The desire to escape representing a coping response to overwhelming maternal and generational pressure. However, trauma is internalized, making emotional escape impossible even when physical withdrawal is imagined. As a quotation, I wanted to disappear to slip into a life where none of this existed. But even as I picture it, I knew I will never be free of her. This quotation highlights the internal conflict between the escape and attachment. At times, she imagined living, Violet's present inside her demonstrate that generational trauma cannot be abandoned, and forces motherhood as an inescapable set of inherited pain. Second, determination of versus self-love. Whitney attempts to cope with trauma by consciously trying to become a different kind of mother. However, this determination is undermined by persistent self-doubt rooted in her traumatic childhood. As the question, I told myself I would not be like her. I questioned my instinct, my affection, and whether I had any right to trust myself at all. The quotation reveals how Britney determination coexist with insecurity, her repeat herself, co- questioning how the trauma disturbed maternal confidence, turning the effort to break generational cycle into a source of anxiety rather than empowerment. The third act of care as the desperation, Britney's caregiving is portrayed as desperate desperate rather than instinctive, shaped by fear of failure and emotional loss. Act of care becoming coping mechanism aimed at preventing harm rather than fostering loss, trust. As a gradation I was had constantly, the more I cared, the more afraid I became, as though love itself had turned into something dangerous. This quotation shows how trying to be caring intensifies Britney anxiety instead of offering resilience. Yet, Indians to affect trauma-driven coping, where love is inseparable from fear, demonstrating how generational trauma distort maternal affection. And the fourth, male present and reinforcement maternal trauma, the role of Fox and political influence. Whitney coping is further destabilized by Fox's dismissal of her concern, reinforcing political patterns that silence maternal intuition and perpetuate emotional neglect across generations. Hmm. As the graduation, Fox said I was being dramatic. It made me feel small, like the sound of my own voice was too much. This quotation shows how Fox invalidation weakened Britney's coping mechanism. By minimizing her fear, political authority reinforced her inherent belief that her emotions are unreliable, deepening the cycle of generational trauma. Next, impact of generational trauma on each generation of the woman in the novel The Purse. First, the gun method of the first generation, ETA. ETA represents the origin of trauma in the maternal line. As emotional cruelty, silence, and neglect create the atmosphere of the fear that shaped the emotional environment inherited by later generations. The quotation, there was no alarm in that house. No one ever said good morning. The siren was the loudest thing about her. This quotation show how Eta neglects is experienced as emotional repression rather than overt violence. The dominance of silence established trauma as a environmental condition, forming the foundation for generational transmission. Second is mother of the second generation, Cecilia. Cecilia internalized Eta's neglect and reproduces it through emotional absence. Her trauma manifests as withdrawal, silence, and inability to provide emotional security for Britney. The quotation, she was there, but she wasn't. The silence was worse than yelling. The quotation shows that Cecilia's trauma is expressed through emotional absence, her inability to engage emotionally reinforced trauma as a normalized maternal behavior as a Britney. The third, Whitley, the protagonist of the third generation. Whitney is the first generation to consciously recognize the inherent trauma. However, awareness alone does not free her from its effect, as trauma is surfaced through motherhood. As a quotation, I had wanted so badly to be different, to be better, but their shadow were already there. The metaphor of the shadow reflects how trauma persists despite conscious resistance. Whitney awareness highlights generational trauma as internalized rather than chosen. Whitney trauma manifests as fear, emotional detachment, and self-doubt in motherhood, challenging the myth of natural maternal instinct. As the quotation, when I held her as a baby, just fear, a fear so sharp it was like a glass in my chest. The quotation showed that inherent trauma in past Britney ability to form a bond. Maternal fear or past instinct demonstrating trauma as a psychological impact on maternal identity. And lastly, Violet, the daughter, the fourth generation. Violet represent trauma expressed behavior rather than verbally. Her emotional distance and rejection reflect the unresolved trauma inherited from her maternal lineage. The quotation, she wouldn't soften against me, she wouldn't let me in. The quotation shows trauma transmission to attachment pattern. Violet rejection mirrors Britney childhood experience, showing trauma continuity across generations. The novel represents trauma as cynical, transmitted through silence, emotional absence, and unhealed wounds rather than explicit abuse. The quotation, it was as if he inherited not only witness silence, but 6 years before her, and that must before that. The quotation explicitly links our coordination reinforced trauma as an inherited emotional legacy embedded with a maternal relationship.